The gavel cracked against polished wood, the thunderous strike silencing every breath. Judge Harrison said, "Order in the court." His voice carried authority that cut through chaos. The water pitcher rattled, droplets spilling across the bench as Sarah Collins gasped, her body trembling under the weight of countless eyes. Sarah said, "I lied." The words fractured the air. Reporters froze mid-sentence, pens suspended above paper. Michael Reeves adjusted his tie, jaw clenching as triumph flickered across his face. Dana Walsh's lips parted, her expression drained of color, disbelief consuming her composure. Juror #7 gripped the armrest until his knuckles turned white, tension carving deep lines across his brow. A coffee cup slipped from a juror's trembling hand, dark liquid spreading like blood across tile. Sarah whispered again, voice trembling, "There's more you don't know." The gallery leaned forward as one, silence tightening like a rope around their throats. Judge Harrison's eyes narrowed, shadowed by doubt. The trial had begun, but survival was already at stake. The silence stretched, thick as smoke. Sarah said, "I never wanted this revealed here." Her words cracked like glass. Dana Walsh whispered to her assistant, "She's unraveling in front of them." Michael Reeves leaned back whispering, "The cracks are spreading." Judge Harrison struck the gavel, his voice booming, "Control yourselves." The gallery erupted in whispers, voices darting like sparks. Sarah's eyes drifted toward Emily Collins in the gallery, her daughter's stare sharp, lips trembling. Emily's silence screamed louder than any word. Dana Walsh slammed her folder shut, frustration radiating from every movement. "We won't allow this collapse," she hissed. The assistant scribbled furiously, ink scratching like fire across paper. Michael Reeves leaned forward with the calm of a predator, his gaze fixed. The courtroom transformed into a cage, fear rattling through every bar. Judge Harrison said, "Miss Collins, explain yourself." Sarah's hands shook, her lips quivering. Sarah said, "I was threatened." Gasps cracked the silence. Dana Walsh snapped, "By whom?" Her tone whipped through the air. Michael Reeves whispered, "Truth always finds its way." Emily buried her face in trembling hands, muffling a sob. The jurors shifted in unease, gazes flicking between witness and attorneys. Papers rustled in the clerk's trembling grip, the noise louder than it should be. Sarah said softly, "If I speak, they'll destroy me." The courtroom froze, every eye pulled toward her like strings tightened. Dana Walsh slammed her fist on the table, fury sharpening her edges. Judge Harrison's gavel fell again, though his eyes betrayed unease. The floor itself seemed to tilt as the truth loomed heavy. The gallery buzzed like a hive in panic. Reporter Mark Taylor muttered, "She's in danger." Michael Reeves straightened, smiling faintly. Michael said, "Let her speak. The jury deserves truth." Dana Walsh shot daggers with her glare. Dana said, "This is reckless theatrics." Judge Harrison's hand trembled before lowering gavel. "The witness will continue," he said, gravel thick in his voice. Sarah glanced at Emily again, eyes pleading for silent strength. Emily's pale face revealed nothing. Juror #7 muttered, "This changes everything." The stenographer's fingers froze above the keys, the moment too heavy to record. Sarah said, "It wasn't my choice," voice fragile, carried on silence, yet sharp enough to wound. The air thickened like storm clouds rolling over a battlefield. Silence pressed like a stone. Judge Harrison said, "Speak your truth, Miss Collins." Sarah's fingers trembled, clinging to the wooden stand. Sarah said, "The man who threatened me is here." The gallery gasped, heads snapping around. Dana Walsh said, "Name him." Her demand cracked like lightning. Michael Reeves tilted his head, eyes gleaming with sharp anticipation. Emily whispered, "No," her voice thin as paper. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicking in bursts. Jurors leaned in, torn between fear and hunger for truth. Judge Harrison's eyes darted across faces, suspicion growing heavy in the air. Sarah closed her eyes, her whisper slicing through the storm. Sarah said, "He sits behind me." The courtroom erupted into shouts and gasps, the fragile order destroyed in a heartbeat. The courtroom air hung heavy after Sarah's revelation. Judge Harrison said, "We will proceed with caution." His voice trembled despite its firmness. Sarah's gaze dropped to her trembling hands, every finger stiff with fear. Dana Walsh muttered to her assistant, "She's unraveling in real time." Michael Reeves leaned forward, his eyes burning with predatory calm, whispering, "The story bends our way now." Emily Collins sat rigid in the gallery, her eyes red with unshed tears, whispering to herself, "Why now? Why here?" Jurors exchanged unsettled glances, their silence thick with confusion. The stenographer's fingers clattered unevenly, breaking rhythm as tension mounted. Judge Harrison rapped his gavel, "The witness will answer." Sarah whispered, "I was threatened to protect someone I loved." Gasps burst again, spreading like sparks across dry grass. Dana Walsh said sharply, "Loved? Explain." Michael Reeves smiled faintly, every muscle in his face alive with opportunity. The storm deepened, and Sarah's fragile anchor seemed to drift into darkness. Sarah's voice trembled like glass about to shatter. Sarah said, "He said if I spoke, my daughter would suffer." Gasps tore through the gallery. Emily froze, tears welling. Emily whispered, "Mom, don't." Her words broke as she buried her face in her hoodie. Michael Reeves tapped his pen slowly against the desk, whispering to co-counsel, "The more she speaks, the more the ground cracks beneath them." Dana Walsh's fury turned sharp as she snapped, "This is emotional manipulation, not testimony." Judge Harrison leaned forward, sweat glistening at his temples. "Counsel, restraint." The jurors shifted, whispering among themselves. Juror #7 whispered, "What if it's true?" The court clerk dropped a folder, papers scattering across the floor with a sound louder than thunder. Sarah's hands shook harder, her lips dry as she whispered, "I couldn't choose between truth and blood." The courtroom no longer felt like a chamber of justice. It felt like a cage of confessions. The gavel slammed again, but it could not cage the chaos. Judge Harrison said, "Compose yourselves." His robe swayed as he leaned forward. Dana Walsh's jaw clenched, her voice slicing the air. "This courtroom is not a stage for melodrama." Michael Reeves smirked faintly, muttering, "But truth often sounds like theater." Emily looked at Sarah, her lips trembling. Emily whispered, "He's here, isn't he?" Sarah flinched, her eyes flicking toward the gallery. Jurors gasped quietly, shifting like restless waves. Reporter Mark Taylor scribbled furiously, muttering, "This is the story of a lifetime." Sarah pressed her palms against the stand, voice breaking, "If I speak his name, none of us will walk free." The gallery buzzed, whispers crawling through the benches. Judge Harrison's hand trembled, gavel suspended mid-air. Dana Walsh said, "If you don't name him, you destroy your own credibility." Sarah's eyes glistened with tears caught between survival and ruin. The silence fractured when Sarah whispered, "It was someone close to me." Dana Walsh snapped, "Name him now." Her fury rolled like thunder. Michael Reeves leaned back, whispering to his co-counsel, "The more she hesitates, the deeper the doubt." Emily's voice cracked, "Don't say it, Mom." Her plea pierced the courtroom. The gallery murmured, restless waves of suspicion building. Judge Harrison steadied himself, voice rough, "This testimony will proceed." Juror #7 shook his head, muttering, "This isn't justice, it's theater." Mark Taylor's pen scratched furiously, his whispers echoing front page. Sarah's eyes darted toward Emily again, tears streaming unchecked. Sarah said, "If I reveal the truth, you'll lose faith in everything you thought you knew." Her words lingered like smoke, settling in lungs, choking the air. The room became a graveyard of trust, waiting for its final burial. The gavel echoed like a final warning. Judge Harrison said, "Miss Collins, you must finish this testimony." Sarah inhaled, her chest rising like a wave about to break. Sarah said, "He's the one who promised me safety and delivered threats instead." Dana Walsh's hands slammed onto the table, voice sharp as knives. "Who?" Michael Reeves' eyes narrowed, his face carved into anticipation. Emily whispered, "No, don't please." Her shoulders shook as her tears spilled. Jurors leaned forward, the air heavy with suspense. Mark Taylor muttered, "She's about to detonate this case." Sarah's lips quivered, her face pale as marble. Sarah whispered, "He is not who you think." The gallery erupted into shouts, voices colliding like crashing waves. Judge Harrison's gavel pounded, but no order returned. Sarah's secret hung between life and destruction, her next word the blade to cut all ties. The courtroom trembled with whispers, the air heavy as chains. Judge Harrison struck his gavel, his voice rough with fatigue. "Silence, or I'll clear this room." The gallery quieted, though their eyes burned with questions. Sarah Collins clutched the stand, whispering, "If I speak, I lose everything." Dana Walsh slammed her notes down, fury burning. Dana said, "Then you are obstructing justice." Michael Reeves leaned forward, his smirk slight but venomous. Michael said, "Or perhaps she's finally telling it." Emily Collins whispered from the gallery, "Mom, don't," her voice thin as paper. Jurors shifted in their seats, unease creeping through every breath. Mark Taylor scribbled furiously, whispering, "Front page tomorrow." Sarah's voice cracked like brittle glass, "There are truths worse than lies." Judge Harrison steadied himself, his hands shaking as he muttered, "This case is slipping into ruin." The silence afterward felt louder than thunder. Dana Walsh rose sharply, her chair scraping across marble. Dana said, "Your Honor, this witness is undermining the integrity of the court." Judge Harrison adjusted his robe, muttering, "Control yourself, counselor." Sarah Collins closed her eyes briefly, whispering, "They told me my blood wasn't enough. They wanted silence too." Emily gasped, her trembling hands covering her mouth. Michael Reeves' lips curled slightly. Michael said, "And now truth becomes poison." Juror #7 muttered under his breath, "I can't trust anything anymore." The gallery stirred, whispers rushing like a tide. Mark Taylor tapped his pen against paper, muttering, "Every word is a dagger." Dana Walsh turned sharply, her eyes narrowing like knives. Dana said, "Then tell us who they are now." Sarah's face twisted with pain, her tears slipping unchecked. The courtroom waited, every breath suspended on her answer. The gavel struck again, but the silence felt brittle, ready to break. Judge Harrison said, "Miss Collins, this testimony teeters on collapse." Sarah's voice cracked. "They made me swear on Emily's life." Emily's face blanched, her body stiff as stone. Emily whispered, "No, not me." Dana Walsh seized the moment, her voice rising, "Your Honor, this proves coercion." Michael Reeves leaned forward, eyes sharp as glass, whispering, "Or fabrication under pressure." Jurors whispered among themselves, heads tilting like restless birds. Mark Taylor scribbled furiously, his hand shaking. Sarah's tears streaked down, her grip unyielding on the stand. Sarah said, "I have carried this alone for too long." Judge Harrison rubbed his forehead, sighing. "And yet you delay." The gallery's whispers swelled, until it felt like the walls themselves spoke. Sarah stared at her daughter, her face a battlefield of fear and guilt. The courtroom door creaked open, a sound like a blade sliding free. Heads turned sharply. Judge Harrison said, "This is irregular." A man in uniform stepped forward, Detective Carl Hayes, his eyes hard as granite. Carl said, "Your Honor, evidence has surfaced contradicting this testimony." Dana Walsh's eyes narrowed. "You weren't summoned." Michael Reeves smirked, whispering, "And yet he arrives." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Sarah said, "You shouldn't be here." Emily whispered, "Who is he?" The gallery's murmurs rose, suspicion twisting like smoke. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel, "Control the room." Carl Hayes held a folder tightly, his voice steady. "This is official record." Jurors leaned forward, their faces tense with curiosity. The trial shifted again, every anchor loosening. Sarah's eyes filled with dread, as if the ground itself betrayed her. Detective Carl Hayes approached the bench, his shoes echoing against marble. Carl said, "This evidence undermines the witness claim." Sarah's face collapsed in horror, whispering, "No, please." Emily whispered, "What evidence?" Dana Walsh reached out sharply. "Hand it over." Michael Reeves leaned back, whispering, and so the cracks widened. Judge Harrison flipped through the folder, his brow furrowing deeply. Judge Harrison said, "These records contradict the timeline given." The gallery erupted in whispers, suspicion flooding the air. Sarah shook her head violently, her tears unstoppable. Sarah said, "It's been altered. You have to believe me." Jurors exchanged nervous looks, some leaning away as if poisoned. Mark Taylor whispered to himself, "This trial just detonated." Judge Harrison pounded his gavel, but his voice faltered. "This court teeters on chaos." The storm inside the courtroom had finally broken loose. The folder sat heavy in Judge Harrison's hands, the courtroom still buzzing with the echo of Carl Hayes's arrival. Judge Harrison said, "Detective Hayes, this court needs explanation." Carl Hayes lifted his chin, his voice calm. "The records prove Sarah Collins was not where she claimed during the night in question." Gasps rippled. Sarah's face twisted in horror. Sarah cried, "That's not true. They've changed it." Dana Walsh said, "Altered records? Prove it." Michael Reeves whispered, "She's caught in her own web." Emily's lips trembled, whispering, "Mom." Jurors leaned forward, curiosity gnawing at them. Mark Taylor scribbled furiously, whispering, "Contradiction at the heart of the trial." Sarah gripped the stand, her knuckles white. Sarah said, "If you believe him, you bury the truth with lies." Judge Harrison's brow furrowed, his eyes narrowing. The storm no longer brewed outside the room. It erupted inside, swallowing order whole. Carl Hayes stepped forward, placing a photo on the evidence desk. Carl said, "This image shows Sarah Collins entering a hotel with another man that night." The gallery gasped, whispers erupting. Sarah's voice cracked. "That was protection, not betrayal." Dana Walsh leaned forward, eyes burning. Dana said, "You lied under oath." Michael Reeves whispered, "And now the double life begins to unfold." Emily's face drained, whispering, "Who was he?" Sarah closed her eyes, trembling. Sarah said, "He was the only one who promised me safety." Jurors exchanged horrified glances, the weight of betrayal painting their faces. Judge Harrison said, "Miss Collins, perjury cannot be dismissed as fear." Mark Taylor's pen scratched faster, whispering, "The star witness collapses in plain view." The courtroom felt like a collapsing house, its beams splitting under too much truth. Sarah's body shook, her tears falling freely. Sarah said, "Yes, I was there, but it wasn't what you think." Dana Walsh struck like lightning. "Then what was it, Miss Collins?" Emily's voice cracked, "Tell the truth." Michael Reeves chuckled low, whispering, "Her empire of lies caves in." Judge Harrison leaned closer, his voice rough. "You are on the edge of perjury charges." Sarah gripped the wood so tight, the veins rose across her hands. Sarah said, "That man was not a lover. He was blackmailing me." The gallery erupted, disbelief echoing. Jurors gasped, exchanging tense glances. Carl Hayes' face tightened, his jaw grinding. Carl said, "You expect us to believe that?" Sarah shouted, "I had no choice." The truth burned the air, and every breath carried its smoke. Judge Harrison struck his gavel, his voice strained. Judge Harrison said, "This court demands clarity." Sarah's eyes darted toward Emily, her tears spilling. Sarah said, "He had letters, private letters that could destroy everything." Dana Walsh snapped, "Then you built your testimony on lies." Michael Reeves leaned back, whispering, "Every empire falls with its secrets." Emily whispered through clenched teeth, "Why didn't you tell me?" The gallery buzzed with restless fury. Carl Hayes held his ground, folder clutched tightly. Carl said, "Those letters prove intent." Sarah screamed, "They were forged." The jury gasped, disbelief rippling through their faces. Mark Taylor whispered to himself, "This is no longer testimony, it's confession theater." The storm swirled, every truth and lie colliding in a room too fragile to hold them. The tension stretched like a rope, fraying at the edges. Judge Harrison said, "Miss Collins, name the man or this court will consider sanctions." Sarah's voice broke. It was Jonathan Pierce. Gasps detonated across the gallery. Dana Walsh said, "The defendant himself?" Michael Reeves smiled sharply, whispering, "And the web collapses inward." Emily screamed, "Mom, stop!" Her cry shattered silence. Carl Hayes' jaw tightened, his voice flat. "That changes everything." Jurors leaned forward, faces pale, stunned by the revelation. Mark Taylor muttered, "A forbidden connection at the heart of the case." Sarah collapsed against the stand, sobbing uncontrollably. Sarah said, "I didn't want it, I was trapped." Judge Harrison's hand shook as he struck the gavel again, his voice unsteady. "This court is adjourned until tomorrow." The trial no longer hunted for truth, it had unearthed betrayal. The courtroom emptied slowly, yet the storm lingered in every shadow. Sarah Collins slumped in her chair, her face streaked with tears. Emily Collins refused to meet her eyes, whispering, "You betrayed me." Dana Walsh stormed past her table, muttering, "We'll rebuild this case from ashes if we must." Michael Reeves leaned back, the faintest grin on his lips as he said, "Ashes leave nothing but freedom for my client." Judge Harrison rubbed his temples, his voice weary. "This court has lost control, and I have no patience left for deceit." Carl Hayes leaned against the wall, folder under his arm, watching with cold detachment. Mark Taylor scribbled furiously, whispering to himself, "Tomorrow's headline writes itself." Sarah's voice cracked into silence. "I was trapped, but no one listened." The spiral had begun, and each figure inside was being pulled further into ruin. The next morning, the courthouse steps were swarmed by cameras. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward like spears. Sarah Collins shielded her face, whispering to Emily, "Stay behind me." Emily pulled away, her voice trembling. "You lied to all of us." Dana Walsh spoke firmly into microphones, "The prosecution will not falter." Michael Reeves smiled for cameras, declaring, "The truth is on our side." Carl Hayes refused comment, his eyes scanning the crowd for danger. Mark Taylor muttered into his recorder, "Public opinion bends before the verdict." Flashes lit the morning, each burst burning like lightning. Sarah's whispered words vanished under the roar of voices. "I only wanted to protect you." Emily turned away, her silence louder than any accusation. The spiral deepened in public view, every eye now a judge, every voice now a verdict. Inside the courthouse lobby, the tension followed like a shadow. Sarah Collins sat against the marble wall, whispering, "I can't breathe." Emily stood across from her, arms crossed tightly, whispering, "You broke everything we had left." Dana Walsh strode past briskly, her voice sharp, "You've ruined this case beyond repair." Michael Reeves adjusted his cufflinks, smirking, "The jury sees only weakness now." Judge Harrison walked slowly, his face lined with exhaustion, muttering, "This trial drags the very court into disgrace." Carl Hayes lingered nearby, his stare locked on Sarah, his voice low, "The lies will consume you before the jury does." Mark Taylor recorded the moment, whispering, "Even silence here screams louder than truth." The marble echoed with footsteps, each sound marking the collapse of trust. The spiral twisted tighter, pulling all of them closer to the breaking point. Back in the courtroom, the jury filed in with restless eyes. Judge Harrison said, "This trial will proceed, but we are on thin ice." Sarah Collins kept her head bowed, whispering, "Please, no more." Dana Walsh rose, her voice sharp, "The defense thrives on confusion, not justice." Michael Reeves replied smoothly, "We thrive only on truth." Emily whispered from the gallery, "I don't know who you are anymore." Carl Hayes sat rigid, his folder unopened, his presence like a blade waiting to strike. Mark Taylor scribbled with furious energy, whispering, "The spiral is complete. The case eats itself." Juror #7 muttered, Nothing makes sense anymore, his voice cracking. Judge Harrison's hand shook as he struck the gavel. Order will be maintained, or this trial collapses entirely. Yet everyone knew it already had. The trial's weight bore down until the air itself felt toxic. Sarah Collins whispered, "I only ever wanted to protect my daughter." Emily cried, "You've destroyed me instead." Dana Walsh slammed her fist on the table, her voice fire. "This is collapse, not testimony." Michael Reeves' tone was calm, almost mocking. "Then collapse is justice." Judge Harrison's face darkened, his voice cracking. "I will not preside over a circus." Carl Hayes whispered to himself, "Truth lies buried in her silence." Mark Taylor muttered into his recorder, "The spiral has reached its center. Destruction for all." Jurors sat stiff, their faces pale with fatigue and distrust. Sarah sobbed quietly, clutching the edge of the stand. Her words came weak. "I have nothing left to give." Silence drowned the courtroom, heavier than any verdict yet to come. The courtroom returned to order, though it felt like order only in name. Judge Harrison said, "We reconvene to hear closing arguments." His gavel echoed like a funeral bell. Sarah Collins sat hunched at the stand, her hands shaking as if they no longer belonged to her. Dana Walsh rose first, voice sharp. "The defense thrives on confusion, but justice demands clarity, and we must not let betrayal blind us." Her words cut through the air like glass. Michael Reeves stood slowly, his smirk faint. Michael said, "What my esteemed colleague calls betrayal, I call truth. Painful, yes, but truth all the same." Emily Collins whispered in the gallery, "She's lost everything." Carl Hayes folded his arms, his stare locked on Sarah. Mark Taylor muttered, "Every word is a blade now." Jurors leaned forward, caught between fury and pity. The climax had begun, and no gavel could halt it. Dana Walsh slammed her fist against the prosecution table, her voice fiery. Dana said, "Sarah Collins chose deceit over duty, lies over justice. No jury should reward that." Sarah whispered, "I was forced." Michael Reeves raised his hand smoothly, his tone calm, and yet no proof exists of coercion, only suspicion. Emily shook her head, whispering, "She was protecting me." Jurors murmured softly, confusion clouding their eyes. Judge Harrison said, "Order," but his voice cracked under strain. Carl Hayes whispered, "The truth is drowning under their voices." Mark Taylor's pen scratched furiously, capturing every sentence. Sarah cried, "I only lied to survive." Dana Walsh shouted back, "Survival isn't justice, Miss Collins." The air vibrated with heat, words sparking like flint against stone. Michael Reeves stepped to the jury, his tone cutting but calm. Michael said, "The prosecution accuses Sarah Collins of lies, but what of the system that forced them? Fear drove her words, not greed, not ambition." Dana Walsh stood tall, her reply sharp, "Fear is no excuse for deception that poisons justice." Sarah whispered, "They would have destroyed Emily." Emily cried out softly, "She's telling the truth." The gallery gasped. Juror #7 muttered, "We can't ignore her fear." Judge Harrison pressed his hand against his temple, muttering, "This case is unraveling faster than we can hold it." Carl Hayes said coldly, "The records don't lie." Sarah screamed suddenly, "They were forged." Silence snapped across the room, everyone frozen. Mark Taylor whispered, "And now, the final fracture has arrived." The room exploded in chaos, jurors murmuring, gallery buzzing, cameras flashing. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel, shouting, "Order!" Sarah collapsed against the stand, her voice ragged. Sarah said, "The man who blackmailed me was Jonathan Pierce." Dana Walsh shouted, "The defendant himself?" Michael Reeves' smirk froze, his eyes flickering with panic. Emily whispered, "It was him all along." The gallery erupted into screams, voices colliding like crashing waves. Carl Hayes stood abruptly, folder in hand. Carl said, "We have evidence contradicting her timeline." Sarah screamed, "You've all been blind." Jurors recoiled, whispers like thunder rolling. Mark Taylor muttered, The climax tears open every hidden seam. Judge Harrison's face paled, his voice shaking. This trial hangs by a thread. The air burned with tension, silence cutting sharper than screams. Judge Harrison said, "The jury will deliberate soon. Speak your final truths now." Dana Walsh stood rigid, declaring, Sarah Collins destroyed credibility, and her ties to Jonathan Pierce doomed the defense. Michael Reeves' voice turned sharp. The prosecution manipulates fear, not evidence. Sarah whispered, "I loved him once, but he betrayed me." Emily sobbed. "You loved the man who ruined us?" Carl Hayes said firmly, "The records still stand against her." Juror #7 muttered, "But her fear feels real." Mark Taylor whispered, "History will write this moment in blood and ink." Judge Harrison pounded his gavel one last time. Judge Harrison said, "This case now belongs to the jury." Silence consumed the courtroom, every heartbeat waiting for verdict. The jury filed back into the courtroom, their faces drawn and pale from the weight of deliberation. Judge Harrison said, "The jury has reached a decision." His voice cracked like old wood, splitting. Sarah Collins clutched the stand, her body trembling. Emily Collins whispered from the gallery, "Please, let it be mercy." Dana Walsh stood with rigid posture, her lips tight. "Justice will have its answer." Michael Reeves adjusted his tie, smirking faintly as though victory was certain. Carl Hayes kept his gaze locked on Sarah, his eyes cold, unreadable. Mark Taylor muttered, "Every headline is written in their silence." Juror #7 rose slowly, holding the verdict slip, his hands shaking. Juror #7 said, "We, the jury." The air collapsed into stillness. Sarah's heart pounded loud enough to echo across the room. Juror #7's voice shook as he read, "We find the defendant not guilty." The words fell like broken glass. Sarah Collins collapsed against the stand, her sobs echoing. Emily screamed, "How could you?" Dana Walsh's face burned with fury, shouting, "This is injustice." Michael Reeves exhaled, his smirk blossoming into triumph. Michael said, "The truth prevails, even when painful." Judge Harrison slammed his gavel, his voice low, "Order must remain." Carl Hayes clenched his jaw, whispering, "Justice has been stolen." Mark Taylor scribbled, whispering, "The star witness fell, and with her the case itself." Jurors shifted uncomfortably, guilt shadowing their faces. Sarah whispered, "I have nothing left." The verdict had spoken, but its weight was unbearable. Chaos erupted after the verdict. The gallery shouted, voices clashing like storm winds. Sarah Collins covered her face, whispering, "I told the truth too late." Emily turned away, tears streaming, "You've destroyed me." Dana Walsh pointed at Reeves, shouting, "You twisted this jury's mind." Michael Reeves replied calmly, "I revealed what you tried to bury." Judge Harrison pounded his gavel, his voice drowned by noise. Carl Hayes muttered, "This court is a graveyard for justice." Mark Taylor's recorder clicked, his voice hushed, "This ending will haunt the nation." Jurors left quickly, their shoulders bent under shame. Sarah whispered again, "Please forgive me," but her words vanished into the storm. Outside the courthouse, the storm followed them. Reporters swarmed like vultures, cameras flashing. Sarah Collins whispered, "No one will ever believe me again." Emily pulled away, her voice sharp, "You're no mother to me." Dana Walsh faced the cameras, declaring, "This was not justice. This was manipulation." Michael Reeves spoke smoothly into microphones. The jury chose truth over theater. Carl Hayes stood on the steps, his voice flat, "The system is broken." Mark Taylor whispered into his recorder, "The trial ends, but the scars remain." The crowd shouted questions, flashes burning like fire. Sarah stumbled down the steps, her sobs drowned by noise. Emily turned her back fully, vanishing into the crowd. As night fell, the courthouse stood silent, its windows glowing faintly against the dark sky. Sarah Collins sat alone on the steps, her blazer wrinkled, her tears dried into silence. Sarah whispered, "I told the truth when no one wanted it." Emily was gone, her absence louder than any scream. Dana Walsh walked away, her fury leaving only bitter silence. Michael Reeves exited with his client, his victory cutting like a blade in the night. Carl Hayes lit a cigarette, muttering, "Truth always loses to power." Mark Taylor typed furiously in the press van, whispering, "The double life of the star witness, it destroyed everyone." Judge Harrison closed the courtroom doors himself, whispering, "Justice never left this building." The night consumed their words, leaving only shadows.